Hello and welcome. I appreciate you being here. So this will be a lecture on a theorem on metamodernism that I've been pondering these few months. So going back to the initial illustration, this is a very important concept to understand. These are the four dimensions, the initial four dimensions. So we can see that it is very clear. Please, everybody, shut your microphone, please. Thank you. So this is a very simple example of how the dimensions evolve and multiply. So starting with this point on your left here, this is dimension number 0. So in here, it is just 1. However, if it is replicated and then referenced back to its original self, we have a line in which we can move from left to right. And then if we replicate this line and reference it back to its original self, we have a square. This is the second dimension, where an object can move left, right, up, and down. And now what happens if we replicate this square and reference itself again to its original? We have a cube, a third dimensional cube, where we can move left, right, up, down, front, and backwards. And so we are told that this is the dimension that we live in, the third dimension. However, if we replicate this cube again and reference it back to its original self, we get this geometry, which is known as a hypercube or a tesseract. However, this illustration is just one iteration of the tesseract, because in the fourth dimension, you can move left, right, up, down, front, and back, and also through time and backwards in time. So a more accurate description of the tesseract or of the fourth dimension is this: an object evolving into itself and outside of itself. So us humans are in constant movement, constant growth, and constant change. Are we three-dimensional beings or four-dimensional beings? Now, we cannot move through time, but we definitely experience the fourth dimension. We just cannot move through it. So with this, I begin the lecture on metamodernism. So this is a theorem on the current historical context that we live in into hyper-digitalization, which we can see in this same lecture, how I just sent a few emails, sent the link of this presentation to a few groups and select people. And now we have a gathering of many people in one virtual space. So towards hyper-digitalization, there are 5 historical events that detonated this inevitable digital revolution: the rapid growth of humanity, the exponential development of technology, which is going into artificial intelligence, which can be summarized into being humans trying to replicate the human consciousness. And we also have the psychological anticipation of the year 2000, the third millennium, Fourthly, we have the financial crisis of 2008 and the proposal of a decentralized economy, Bitcoin, and other blockchain applications like smart contracts, NFTs, and metaverses. And finally, COVID-19 and the forceful adaptation humans had to get into hyper-digitalization. So in the timeline, this is viewed as natural evolution. Exactly 200 years ago in 1822, humans mechanically replicate the human brain in simple terms. The first analog or modern computer is created. In 1922, 100 years ago, roughly, human culture referenced the machine to the highest motor behind civilization after the Industrial Revolution and the globalization of the economy. And so we have the modernist philosophy of the machine is better than the human. And then in 1983, humans replicated communications and interactions, the internet. And today in 2022, after being forced into adopting hyper-digitalization for 2 years by COVID, the necessity for a more decentralized internet surges. Web3 begins to take form. So another timeline in the visual arts, we can begin. This is all very abstracted. I just want to get to the key points in history. Of course, I am missing a lot of technicalities, but bear with me. So in classical history, humans developed visual representation abilities, and the primary reference or the highest form of art is the reference to the human body. Then after the medieval times and Gothic cathedrals, which lost the reference to the human body and instead chose a scale more appropriate to God in these monumental edifications of Gothic cathedrals, the Renaissance surges. And the Renaissance is just a historical reference back to classical Occidental culture. And then visual representation techniques continue to evolve. The perspective and vanishing points are discovered, so humans better represent the visual environment. And so it evolved into Baroque and Rococo, and then back again into historical historicism, and then modernism comes through, referencing the machine. And all visual representation techniques by the human are made obsolete by the machine. The first camera is invented, and all visual artists who better represented reality now were no match for the capabilities of a camera. And so human artists adapted, and they created visual languages that were unavailable for the machine. Creativity and abstract art is born. And so in postmodernism, humans realize the major atrocities made possible by the machine after years of global warfare, and the culture rejects modernity. And we go back to anthropomorphic and archetypical and relatable historical reference. Again, a reference. And symbols come back to surface, giving priority to human emotions over human logic. And today, in this stage, which we are calling metamodernism, algorithms are developed to identify human emotions, predict human behavior, and even make more complex abstract art than the human brain is capable of. Millions of references are over the internet database are being used to generate new algorithms and continue over developing itself. So this is all a very natural evolution of what happens. In this figure, which is a toroidal field or toroidal geometry, another fourth dimensional geometry, we can see that all of humanity's changes through cultural movements can be diagrammed here. And here we have the central point of the torus, and this being the human body itself, the human itself. So we have classical history, or rather we have Renaissance, for example, and then it begins to evolve itself into Quattrocento, Cinquecento, and then the Baroque era, which is, in simple terms, is a more developed and ornamental form of the Renaissance. And then going into Rococo, it's over development, and then going back into historicism of the 1800s. And this can also be seen in the Gothic movement, in every movement of culture. And so what we are proposing here is an event to present the School of Art, Architecture and Design, and bring like minds and professionals together with students, which are the next generation of architects, and better understand hyper-digitalization because they live it every day. So we want to present the newest digital tools for design, their social, educational, and ecological impact, their philosophical and existential implications, and the paradigm shift that this new era of information represents for civilization's development into the third millennium. This will be a multidisciplinary event. We don't want to keep only the scope of architecture. We want to include programmers, digital animators, industrial designers, engineers, and physics majors into the event to have a dialogue and better understand the culture and have different perspectives on what we are currently living through. So what we'll do an architecture, algorithms, and creation event. Firstly, we will have lectures by exponents of new architecture, architect Jack Rendler from SciArc, and architect Miguel Ruvalcaba from Universidad of Michoacán, which are experts in all innovative and the newest of tools for design in architecture, and also in programming, which today is basically the same. If we have architects here in this lecture, you can see that AutoCAD and Revit is just, we are just making inputs of data and commands, which could be summarized in scripts, and it's basically the same process as a programmer. So after these lectures, we'll have a roundtable with designers, programmers, engineers, and also social studies experts to have a dialogue and get to a conclusion of what we are experiencing. Further, we'll have workshops of advanced softwares, mainly QGIS, Grasshopper, Mandelbrot, Unity 3D. And we will provide software packages, models, scripts, and video tutorials that are generated in each course. And after that, we'll have a showcase of workshop final designs and also make NFT sales of outstanding projects. And after that, the most important aspect of the event is to make a digital global diffusion. Documentation of everything that happens, all the lectures, all the dialogue in the roundtable, the workshops, and the showrooms, plus the abstraction of this long video of documentation for the general public to consume. So we have Miguel Ruvalcaba. He has background in programming and art and advanced architecture. He currently gives a master's class in advanced design tools. And his work focuses on understanding the relationship between human beings and form through the intersection between computational thinking and the philosophy of science. He very much understands these tools, not only using them to make visually attractive forms, but he also makes a lot of diagrams and tries to understand and mix it with ancient philosophy of Plato's heaven and other great thinkers. And he includes them in his programming. So these are a few of the quick animations that he does, or not quick, but more simple and abstract, not necessarily architecture. And so at first glance, when we think of algorithms and computational design, we think of not human or very orthogonal and robot-like. But in this stage of the era of information, we can get it to a point that it is just a simulation of reality. It's not separated from it. It's not a digital escapism. It's a digital aid for the reality we live in. So if we can see here in this particular animation, this animation is just one line that is being iterated and replicated, overdeveloped, and referenced back to itself, the same as I was explaining in the initial illustrations. It is just a replication and evolution and natural evolution. And now we have Jack Rendler from SciArc and Harvard. And his philosophy is to help and grow, design, build, and maintain a balanced built environment with nature. He currently works at E7 Architecture Studio, and recently he made public his next project, which is the Nexus Terraforma, which is a more immersive digital space, which we will go and we will get into. So this is the Nexus Terraforma, which is a virtual space, a metaverse. However, when we usually speak to the general public on metaverses, Mark Zuckerberg comes to mind, and like digital escapism and you know, brainless people from Wall-E connected to computers. But the scope of this project is for us to use these digital tools to make parallel cities in a digital space to better understand the city. So going into this particular slide, architects that have used QGIS and other type of GIS tools know that it's a very clear way to visualize the built environment. We are using open source databases from government agencies and from space agencies and like NASA and topography, etc., to represent in a visual medium what the city is looking like. And not only that, we can see through census and through social and demographic and biological studies what other factors are playing a role in the development of the city. And so this project aids to basically replicate the whole planet through collaboration processes. What's great about this project is that it requires collaboration between nations, between businesses, big businesses, small businesses, architects, designers, and multidisciplinary academics, because every study can be geo-referenced into a specific zone and specific city and a specific neighborhood. And usually social studies or biological studies or meteorological, etc. These academics make very good analysis and conclusions, but they end up being only read by people in that discipline. And so this is a platform for all these academics to georeference and visually represent their studies for the general public's understanding of what is happening within their cities. And so this brings a lot of opportunities for government projects and for the public to make better decisions and make better opinions on what needs to happen in the city. Because we can aid ourselves with real academic and hard numbers studies in a visual format. And so communities that usually get marginalized and don't end up going to city meetings now have a quick access through a digital connection to have a voice and a presence made apparent in these meetings and proposals of new developments. And so going back into the event, we want to make a very clear emphasis on the global digital diffusion. Following the event, we want to make a high quality post-production documentation for its eternal historic preservation on the World Wide Web. And not only that, but also make emphasis on the abstraction. So this way we condense all these seemingly complex concepts and philosophical implications for the general public's understanding. So I end today's lecture with this phrase: we're going towards a new architecture. It's not something I'm proposing as an innovative phase of that I came up with, but this is just an analysis from my perspective, an interpretation of what is going on and what will come. So these are just layers and layers and layers of digital replicas to better aid our reality. Thank you. And so with that, we can go into question and answers, if there's any. Or just comments or whatever comes to mind. Okay, well, if there are no further questions, then I close the lecture right here. Thank you very much. You can all contact me. You have my email, and to have further information and further events, we will keep informing you on the emails and on Instagram and all digital platforms. So thank you very much. De nada. Qué bueno que les gustó. Yo quería platicar con gente. Nadie quiere platicar o dar una, no sé, pregunta, comentario. Bueno, ya son las 4:30. Ahora sí ya se acabó el tiempo. Pero muchas gracias a todos por venir, asistir, y los mantengo en contacto. Nos vemos a la próxima.
Gracias, Hugo. Excelente info. Me encantó.
De nada, vale. Gracias por venir. Gracias, Dana. Bueno, pues nos vemos. Bye.